Open Photoshop and reset your default preferences in the process. Remember that you hold Control-Alt-Shift for Windows and Command-Option-Shift on a Mac. Click Yes to delete the Adobe Photoshop settings file. Once you're in Photoshop, go to Mini Bridge at the bottom of your screen. Your Mini Bridge may be collapsed, so you may need to double-click its tab to open Mini Bridge. You may also open Mini Bridge by going to File, Browse in Mini Bridge. If you have not already launched Adobe Bridge in the background, you may need to do that also. From Mini Bridge, access your favorites, and from your favorites, access your Lessons folder, and then Lesson 4. In the Lesson 4 folder, you will see 5 files. You will see the end file, which is a postcard that you're going to create. You will see the start file with a pineapple, the beach photograph, the family photo for an extra credit activity, and then another flower. There is a flower present in the original image, so that is flower 2. Double-click upon the end file to open it in Photoshop, and let's analyze how this file was built. As you can see, we have a postcard that was created for print, and this postcard contains, from the back layer to the foreground layer, a sky background, a pineapple, 2 flowers, a beach photo, a postmark, and 2 sets of text, Hawaii and Island Paradise. Now that's what it looks like to the eye, but the way this was built, the structure of the file, is found in the Layers panel. If you do not have your Layers panel visible, you could go to Window, Layers, to open the Layers panel. And in the Layers panel, we'll look at the stacking order of this image from the top down. The image has a border as the topmost layer. That would be the layer that is closest to you in the stack of layers that build this postcard. So the border is the white edge that you see here. You have the postage stamp layer. That is the postage stamp object that you see here in the center. You have the Hawaii layer, the text that you see at the bottom. Now I did say text. That's a text layer that has likely been rasterized and converted to pixels because it does not have the big T thumbnail that you'll see here in just a moment. You have the flower layer, which is the flower in the upper right hand corner. You have the beach layer, which is the smaller photograph of the beach here in the center. You have the type layer, Island Paradise. You see the type icon. That type icon tells you that this is still a type layer. That's the Island Paradise at the bottom. Below that, you have a hue and saturation adjustment layer. You'll also notice the small icon that points downward to tell you that this hue and saturation layer has been clipped into the layer below it and is only affecting that layer and not all other layers that fall below the adjustment layer. That affects the flower in the lower left-hand corner. You will also note that you have the pineapple copy layer and the original pineapple layer. That was done to enhance the look of the pineapple by changing the blending mode. So there are 2 pineapples, and one of those images is on top of the other image with the enhanced blending mode. Then you have the clouds background, which sets over the original white background layer. Within the Layers panel, you will note on the left that you have a visibility column. You can click upon one of the icons. I'm clicking on the eye icon for border, and that would hide the visibility of the border layer. If you click that again, you will show the visibility of the border layer. So the visibility for each of these layers can be hidden or shown. Any layers where their visibility is hidden, those layers will print without that object being visible, although the object is still a part of the file because its visibility is hidden. You will also note that some of the layers have an FX, which stands for a layer style, or maybe you might think of that as a special effect. Those FX styles were added after the layer was created. That can be done through the menu by choosing Layer, Layer Style, and choosing one of the options. It can also be done by going to the bottom of the Layers panel and clicking upon the FX, which is usually my habit. So we have 4 layers that have enhanced layer styles. Other things you might notice from the layers panel: the background layer is locked. In a new image that does not have a transparent background, the background layer will always be locked, and the background layer may be a solid color or it may contain a photographic type image. Any object or pixel data could remain or be visible on the background layer. Many people choose to leave the background completely empty of pixel data except for a solid color, and then build on top of that so they gain control of all of the objects that are stacked on top of the background. So that's a look at the end file. We're going to close that file and begin building this file ourselves. When you go to close the file, if it asks you if you want to save it, don't save it. We were just reviewing the file. Go back to MiniBridge and double-click upon the 04 start file to open it in Photoshop. When the file opens, you'll see just a picture of the pineapple. As you go to the Layers panel for an analysis, you will see that they have given us the postage stamp layer, the Hawaii layer, the flower layer, but the visibility of those layers has been turned off. We only see the white background layer and the pineapple layer. That brings us to page 93 in the textbook. What we're going to do is we're going to go to page 94 and we're going to add another image to this compilation of images that we have called 04 Start. Before we begin though, and I do this frequently, we should save a duplicate copy. Access your File menu, go to Save As, and change the name of this file from 04 Start to 04 Working. That way we won't modify the original image. Say OK to maximize the compatibility. Now open a second image in Photoshop by going down to MiniBridge, which you probably still have open. Double-click upon the beach image. Once you double-click upon the beach image, it opens in Photoshop, and you will note from the tabs that you have two images open, and you can switch to either of those images by clicking upon the tab. We want to bring the beach image into the postcard image, and to do so it would be easier for us to view both of them at the same time. To do that, go to the window menu at the top, choose Arrange, and then choose Two Up Vertically. That will place the two open images on your screen side by side. That way you will be able to easily drag one image into the other. Make the beach image active by clicking upon its tab, then look in the Layers panel. You will see that the beach image only has one layer, and it has a default name of Layer 1. Double-click upon the text Layer 1 and rename that layer Beach. Now that the layer has been renamed, choose your Move tool and drag the beach image into the pineapple image. When you release, the beach image is placed into the pineapple image, and it is placed above the active or currently selected layer in that image when you were last using the image. I'm going to go ahead and close the beach file, and if it asks me if I want to save it, I will say no, don't save. And I have my composite image. In the Layers panel, you will see that my active or selected layer when I left this image was the postage stamp layer. And I really want the beach image to appear lower in the stacking order. So I'm going to drag that beach image down to above the background image. When I do so, I'm dragging it by holding the mouse. When I do so, it's placed underneath the pineapple. Well, I'm not going to be able to see it. Remember, the pineapple was going to be sort of a part of the background right above the clouds that we'll add later. So let's drag the beach image above the pineapple. Now you see the beach image above the pineapple. It may not be centered on the screen. You can drag it to the center if you choose to. We're going to be resizing it and then also putting it into a different location in a moment. But the beach image is now on top of the pineapple layer. Your stacking order is important because the layers that appear at the top will be closest to the eye, and those that appear at the bottom of the stack will be the farthest away from the eye. That brings us to, it looks like page 96. On page 96, it has us relocate the image and then look at some of the other layers. Turn on the eye by clicking in the left column of the postage stamp layer, and you will see the postage stamp across the top of your image. Turn on the eye or click in the left column for Hawaii, and you will see the Hawaii text at the bottom. Click the icon for visibility for the flower, and you will see it in the upper left-hand corner. So at the moment we are looking at all of the visible layers, and you can see how they are stacked on top of one another. A shortcut that you might want to know, we want to work with only the beach image at this moment. If you go to the visibility column for the beach image and you hold down Alt while you click upon the visibility icon, you ask to display only the current image, or only the current layer I should say, and hide all of the other layers. So you can see now that all I'm looking at is the beach image. If I were to Alt or Option click that again, I would be looking at all of the visible layers in the image. So one more time, I'm going to Alt or Option click the visibility icon for the beach layer so that I see only the beach layer. The first thing I'd like to do is add a layer style to that layer. As I mentioned earlier, you could use the menu option, Layer, Layer Style, and choose the stroke option. But I prefer to make certain that the layer is active or selected. I can tell that because it's sort of a dark shade of blue. I go to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the FX. Clicking the FX, I have a shortcut menu which appears, and this allows me to select the layer style which I would like to add to the current layer. I'm going to choose Stroke. Now I can move the layer style dialog box to the side so that I can watch my layer and the changes that occur to it as I add the layer style. Make certain that the preview box is checked so that these changes will be visible to you as you add them. On the settings, for the size of the stroke, we want to set the stroke to 5 pixels. You can use the slider, or you can actually type the number into the box. We want the position of the stroke to be inside the graphic. So that will move the stroke inside the graphic rather than to the outside. We want to set the blending mode to normal. We want the opacity to be 100%. We want the color to be white. We're going to click the color box and choose white in the upper left-hand corner and click OK. Now we can see, barely see, the white border around the image. We're going to click OK to accept the layer style, and you'll notice in the Layers panel that the beach layer now has an FX, denoting that this layer has a layer style. There is an collapse and expand icon to the right. When I expand the layer style, it tells me that I have added effects of stroke. If I were to double click upon stroke, I open the layer style dialog box and have the ability to modify the stroke. If I don't want to make any changes, I could just cancel or say OK, and I still retain the layer style. Notice the eye icons. You can turn off the visibility of a single layer style or all layer styles by clicking the eye for the layer style itself. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that layer style and move on with rearranging our layers. On page 99 of the textbook, it tells us to make certain that we make the postage stamp layer visible, the Hawaii layer visible, the flower layer visible, the pineapple layer visible, and the background layer visible. I did those one at a time, but remember I could have Alt-clicked the eye icon on the beach layer to make all layers visible. You can see them all on your screen right now. Now we want to go to the Layers panel and drag the beach layer up so that it's positioned between the pineapple and the flower. I've already done that. I have my beach layer between the pineapple and flower. If you'd followed the text, your beach layer may have been here, below the pineapple. Just drag it up one step, and it will be one step higher in the stacking order. Now we're going to change the opacity of the postage stamp layer. You see right now how dark the postage stamp is, its visibility on the screen. Select the postage stamp layer And the opacity for that layer is here at the top of the Layers panel when the layer is currently selected. It is set to 100%, and there are several ways to change that. You can drop the arrow down and use the slider. You may also type 25% into the box, or you can quickly from your keyboard type 25, and that will actually change the opacity to 25. For 10% opacity setting, you just press 1. For 20%, 2, this is a shortcut. It's the number keys across the top of your keyboard. 30%, a 3, 40%, a 4. When you want a fractional percentage, they have to come close together, so if you wanted 25, it's 25 quickly. I normally do that rather than use the slider or the drop down. That changes your ability to see through that layer. So the opacity setting of 25% displays the postage stamp like this. Opacity, when something is opaque, you cannot see through it, and when it's transparent, you can see through it. So what we might say is 0% opacity is transparent. 100% opacity setting is non-transparent or solid. So 25%, this is a little closer to being transparent than it is to being solid. It's a low opacity setting. We have reduced the opacity setting of that layer, and it would be a good time for us to save our file. You could go to File, Save, but a good shortcut is just hold down your Command or your Control key and press an S, which I'm doing. We're going to duplicate a layer and change its blending mode. Click the eye icon next to the Hawaii flower and beach layers to hide them. Hawaii, flower, and beach layers. We're looking at only the pineapple layer. Now we want to duplicate the pineapple layer, and there are several ways to do that in Photoshop. If you have the Move tool, you can Alt drag it. You can use the Layer menu. You can use the menu on the Layers panel. You can drag to the new layer icon at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to the pineapple layer to make it active, and I'm right-clicking upon it. Notice that I right-clicked out here in an open area, and I'm saying Duplicate Layer. A dialog box appears asking you what you would like to call the duplicate layer and what document you would like to place that duplicate layer in, because it could be placed in another open document. I'm going to accept the defaults and click OK. The duplicate pineapple layer appears on top of the original pineapple layer, and both of their visibilities are present. I don't see any change in the document because the topmost pineapple layer is not transparent. There's no setting that would allow me to see the pineapple layer down below. We're going to go to an area of the Layers panel called Blending Modes, and by default, blending modes would be set to normal. When I drop the arrow down, I have several options to change the blending mode, and the way this works, it will cause the current layer to blend with the pixel layers below it to create different effects, either lighten or darken, or several different mixes that we can get. In this instance, we're going to overlay. Now watch the pineapple. You can barely see at the distance from my Layers panel, but watch the changes in the pineapple when I choose the overlay blending mode. It's as if the top pineapple strengthens the colors within the pineapple down below. They're stacked on top of each other and they overlay, so their colors in effect are multiplied. And that blending mode is not visible within the layer structure, only from the setting at the top of the Layers panel that says Overlay. On the postage stamp layer, which is very difficult to see right now, we're going to go to the postage stamp layer and we're going to change its blending mode to Multiply, and that will in effect darken it just a bit, and it will create different changes as it's laid on top of the pixels of other layers due to the color mix that will occur from those other layers. Let's go ahead and save our file with a Control S. Click the visibility icon for the beach layer to make it visible. You'll notice that you can now see the beach layer on top of the pineapple. Make certain that the beach layer is active by clicking upon it to select it. It will be blue in the Layers panel. Then we're going to access a transformation. We can do that through the menus by going to Edit, Free Transform, but you'll notice the shortcut is Control or Command T. Since I'm here, I will go ahead and press Free Transform. That puts a bounding box or handles around the edge of that image. we're going to change the size of that object to about 50% of its current size. Now, it will be difficult for me to show you this at the same time that I resize the object, but you notice that the width and height are right now at 100%. As you drag in on a corner handle, you'll want a straight two-pointed arrow. Hold your Shift key, and that will keep the height and width constrained to their original proportions. But be watching up at the top on the width and height until you reach 50%. There will be a point in the movie, my movie, that you will not be able to see those numbers, but I'm going to 50%. And it doesn't have to be exactly 50%. Go to about 50%. I stopped at 50.4. Now that we have that about half of its original size, we're also going to rotate it a bit. Place your cursor. You'll notice when your cursor is to the outside edge of one of the corner handles and not touching it, that you have a curved two-pointed arrow. I'm above the top right corner. It could be any one of them, and I'm rotating a bit by pulling down with my mouse so that I slant the beach image sideways a bit. Once I have that slanted and sized to the position I want it, because I'm in free transform right now, I can click the commit check on the tool options bar, or I can press enter, and that commits the transformation and removes the bounding box. Now I will want to relocate that image. I'm going to display the flower layer, and once I've displayed the flower layer, I'm going to make certain that my beach image is still the active layer, and I'm going to drag, I have the move tool, upward to sort of tuck the little beach image underneath the edges of the flower. It doesn't have to be in exact position. You'll see an illustration on page 103 of the textbook where that has been placed. Press Control S to save your file, Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and that saves the file to the point we are at right now. Now we're going to use a filter to create some artwork. Go down and select your background layer. Once you have the background layer selected, create a new layer by going to the Layer menu and choosing New Layer, or you can just click the New Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. That will create a new transparent layer called Layer 1 above the background layer. Double-click upon the text Layer 1 and type the name Clouds. Now, of course, at this moment that layer is transparent and there aren't any clouds upon it, but built into Photoshop is a cloud filter, so we're going to create some clouds. Right now my colors are set to default, a black foreground and a white background. Click upon the foreground color to open the color picker. Once the color picker is open, go into a range of blues and look for a sky blue color. Now the book probably has an exact setting, but find a sky blue color that you think is attractive. Once you've selected the shade within the larger window on the left, click OK, and you'll notice that your colors are set to a sky blue and a white. Now go to the filter menu at the top and choose Render, the render category, and then choose Clouds. Photoshop will mix your foreground and background colors to create that cloud filter. Go to the Layers panel and hold the Alt key while you click the visibility icon for the clouds layer, and this is what Photoshop has done for you with the cloud filter. It's mixed the foreground and background colors to simulate the look of clouds. Now go back and Alt click the clouds layer to make all your layers visible again. Next, we're going to drag a new layer into the document. It's going to be a flower. We could open the flower, do the two up vertically like we did a moment before, but you can also go to your file management tool on your system. I'm on a Mac, so I'm using Finder, but if you're on a PC, you would use Windows Explorer. Access your Lessons folder, access Lesson 4, and we want to drag the Flower 2 image into our current document. So I can just relocate my Finder window and drag Flower 2 into this document, release, and the flower is added to this image. It's the purple flower that you can barely see in the background. It comes into the image with a bounding box because it was added to Photoshop as a smart object. We'll learn more about smart objects later, but smart objects, so just a little bit of information about them, they can be scaled and transformed multiple times without degrading the image, so it retains the quality of the original. We have to commit that addition of the smart object. We could either press enter or click the commit checkbox, and we have added the flower to the image. The location of the flower is behind the pineapple for me right now, so I need to make certain I drag it above the pineapple, both the pineapple and the pineapple copy layers. And then I'm going to drag down, I have my move tool, and place that purple flower, there are actually two of them, but only one needs to be visible, in the lower left-hand corner of the image. It came in with its original name of Flower 2, the file name. You'll notice the little square in the lower right-hand corner that tells you that is a smart object, a special type of object in Photoshop that you can edit without making permanent changes to. Now that we have it added, we're going to work on some text. I think it might be a good idea to press Ctrl or Command S to save our file again. In adding text, we're going to make certain that the Hawaii text layer is visible. It's placed here toward the bottom center. As I mentioned, that was very likely a text layer to start with that has been rasterized. Once we have that layer visible, we want to make certain that we have no selected objects. I don't have any, but Control D would deselect those objects. We're going to go to the foreground color swatch and choose a grassy shade of green. Click OK. Once we've chosen that color as our currently active foreground color, we're going to go to the Type tool. Once I select the Type tool, I notice that whatever my foreground color was, that's the color now set for the Type tool. Before we add type, we're going to make some changes or make certain that we have the correct changes to add the text. Choose the font called Birch Standard. On the font style, leave that set to regular. Choose a fairly large font, about a 36-point font. Remember that there are several ways to change your font style: by dropping the arrow down and choosing from a preset, by using the scrubby slider to the left. From the anti-alias, choose crisp, and we need to set tracking. Well, tracking isn't visible on the tool options bar. There is a special panel for working with type. Go to the Windows menu and choose the Character panel. Once you've chosen the Character panel, you will see it pop out or display to the left of the original panels, and all of the settings that we set on the tool option bar could also be set here. The tracking value is here. Make certain you set that to 250. We want this to appear in all caps. These are special little font options. Here is bold and italic and all caps and small caps and so on. So choose the one that says all caps. Choose also the one that is bold. And I think that's all the settings that we want right now. Click below Hawaii and then type Island Paradise. Once you have typed Island Paradise, select the Move tool and drag that text below Hawaii. Now it isn't real visible at the moment, but we're going to add some layer styles that will make it more visible. To do so, we're going to change Hawaii first. In changing Hawaii, we're going to apply a gradient to the Hawaii layer. So go to your Layers panel and click upon the Hawaii layer to select it. Then hold down Control or Command and click the layer thumbnail. That will automatically select all of the pixels that reside upon that layer, in our case the characters in the word Hawaii. Go to your Tool Options bar, and from the Tool Options bar select the Gradient tool. We're going to add a linear gradient to this text. Go to your foreground color and open the color picker. Choose a bright orange, which will be here at the bottom. Click up on the shade you'd like to use, and then click OK. That leaves me with a foreground color of orange and a background color of white. I have the gradient tool, so I'm looking at the tool options bar and choosing the option that says foreground to background. That will blend the foreground and background colors together. The next four buttons make certain you have the first one set, which is actually a linear gradient. You can have a radial gradient or an angle or a reflected or a diamond gradient. So I have the first one, a linear gradient. Now that I have my gradient tool set, I'm going to go to the bottom of the characters in Hawaii and I'm going to drag from the bottom up. To drag in a straight line, hold the Shift key, dragging from the bottom to the top of the characters. That will place the foreground color at the direction that I began dragging. So the orange is placed at the bottom and then that faded to white at the top. So we faded from the orange foreground color to the white background color and added that gradient. We're ready to deselect our text. Remember that you can go to Select, Deselect, or press Control Command D. To add layer styles, we're going to go back to the Island Paradise layer, select it in your Layers panel, and then we could go to Layer, Layer Style Drop Shadow, which seems too much trouble to me. I'm going to click the FX icon at the bottom of the screen and choose Drop Shadow. Now, once I've chosen that, the Layer Style dialog appears, Layer Style dialog box appears, and you can see the changes over here to the left. In the Drop Shadow dialog box, make certain that Preview is selected, and then make certain your blending mode is set to multiply, your opacity is set to 75%, the angle is set to 78 degrees, the distance is set to 5 pixels, the spread is set to 30%, and the size is set to 10 pixels. That will change the look of your gradient. You can see the gradient applied to the Paradise text, the Island Paradise text now. Click OK to accept these settings. Now we have a nice layer style added to the green text, and we would like to copy that same layer style with a few modifications to the Hawaii text. There are a couple of different ways to do that. I can see the FX, I can see the layer style. I'm going to collapse the layer style. I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key and drag the FX, you see how it's dragging in an upward direction, to the Hawaii layer. I'm going to release my mouse, and the same layer style of Drop Shadow with the same settings was applied to Hawaii. Now that I've added that layer style, I'm going to add another layer style to Hawaii. And to do so, I can just double click upon the FX to open the layer style dialog box and watch the Hawaii text as I make the addition. The layer style that we're going to add is stroke. So I select stroke. Notice I clicked at the right and I'm in the stroke settings. The size of the stroke is going to be 4 pixels, that is. The position is going to be on the outside of the text. The blending mode is going to be normal. The opacity setting is going to be 100%. It will be fully opaque. The color of the layer style is going to be a green similar to the Island Paradise screen. Right now I'm seeing a stroke of black. I click the foreground color box to open the color picker on top of the layer style dialog box, and in my opinion, to get a close screen, I'll just sneak out and sample the green in Island Paradise. That samples the green shade. I'm clicking OK, and I have a stroke added to Hawaii along with its drop shadow, and the stroke is green, the same green that I was previously using on the text layer. I am going to click OK to accept those changes, and now I see that the Hawaii layer has two layer styles. It has a stroke and a drop shadow. Remember the eye icons? If I turn off the eye on stroke, you no longer see the stroke on Hawaii. If I turn off the eye on drop shadow, you no longer see the drop shadow. Yeah, of course, if I turn them back on, you see both of these layer styles or special effects. Now would be a good time to save our file again with the controller or Command S. Next, we're going to add a layer style to the flower layer. So go to your layers panel and select the flower layer. I'll go ahead and collapse the layer styles on the Hawaii layer. With the flower layer style selected, go to the bottom of the layers panel, click upon the FX, and choose Drop Shadow. Once we've chosen Drop Shadow, change the opacity setting to 60%, change the distance to 13 pixels, change the spread to 9%, and those are all the changes. We do want to talk just a moment about use global light. Normally, when you're applying layer styles to multiple layers within an image, you want that checkbox selected, and that means the light setting, the angle of the light, will be consistent throughout all of the layer styles that have been added. So do make certain that use global light has been checked. The blending mode should also be set to multiply. Now we're not going to click OK because we're going to add another layer style. That layer style that we just added is visible around the edges of the red flower at the top right. To add another layer style, we're going to click upon Satin. I'm clicking to the right. Once I click upon Satin, it doesn't look very good at the moment, but we're going to make some changes. Change the opacity setting to 20%. Change the distance to 22 pixels. And we're going to choose a fuchsia shade that would complement the flower. So here's the shade of the satin effect, and we're looking for something that's sort of a fuchsia pink red color, and you'll see how that brightens up the flower. So choose your color, so get a good color for that flower, and click OK. We've added the satin effect, and we've added it in a fuchsia color. Go ahead and click OK, and that effect enhances the look of the flower in the upper right hand corner. If I turned off the effects, you see the color of the flower. Turn on the effects, just brightens it up a bit. Next thing we'd like to do is add an adjustment layer. Adjustment layers are amazing in that they enhance or change the pixel data on the layers below them, but they are non-destructive in that adjustment layers stand on their own and can be deleted or can be hidden, not affect the file, so they're non-destructive in nature. This adjustment layer is going to be added to the flower in the lower left-hand corner, the purple flower. So go to your Layers panel and click upon Flowers 2. Remember, that's the Smart object. To add an adjustment layer, you can use the Adjustments panel above the Layers panel. I know that hue and saturation is the first icon on the second row. Click upon that. You'll see in the Layers panel that a hue and saturation layer has been added. In the Properties panel that pops out to the left, change the hue to 43. You could drag or enter the number. Change the saturation to 19. And change the lightness to 0 if necessary. Now what you may have noticed, your entire image has changed because a hue and saturation adjustment layer will make changes to all the pixel data on layers that reside below it. So everything from the flower down, the flower in the lower left, brightened up on the screen. The pineapple even turned green. As you look at this layer structure, again, that hue and saturation layer is affecting all of these layers. We only want it to affect the flower layer. You can right-click upon this layer and you can actually create a clipping mask. A shortcut to create a clipping mask is to place your cursor on the line between those two layers and hold your Alt or Option key, and you'll see a little icon that shows you it's going to clip downward. That's Alt or Option. Touch the line between the two and click. That creates the little down pointing arrow that says I am making an adjustment, but only to the layer that resides below. You'll notice now that the pineapple, the sky, everything that was down below is back to its original colors, and only the flower is being affected by that adjustment. Let's go ahead and save our file again with a Control S. And then we will update some of our layer effects. In the Layers panel, I believe this is new to CS6 because I had not noticed it before. There at the top of the layers panel, you can choose to look at layers or filter them. It's called filter, but it's sort of sorting them. Make certain that's set to what kind of layers they are. If you want to see only adjustment layers and you click the adjustment layer, I'm sorry, that was the filter icon, then you'll see only the ones that have had filters. Then if you click the next icon, you will see only those that have adjustment layers. Now you have to turn this one off. This was filter for pixel layers, my fault. Filter for pixel layers, that showed all of the layers that had pixel data. Turn that one off and only the second one on, and you're looking at only adjustment layers, which shows us we only have one. Turn that one off, turn on the type layers. It will show you the only layer in our image that is actually a type layer, the Island Paradise. So while we're looking at the Island Paradise layer, click upon it to select it. We're going to change its size. Now we don't need to drag across the text to change its size because the layer is currently selected, but we will need the Type tool. Select the Type tool, change the size of type to 32. Of course, you'll see that the text is now smaller than it used to be. Because you have the Type tool, you can quickly enter text editing mode by just clicking within the type. I clicked right to the left of the P, and I'm going to type of and space. Now I'm going to get my Move tool, and I'm going to center Island of Paradise below Hawaii. Hawaii, Island of Paradise. I think to myself, no, I don't like the of, so I'm going back to the Type tool, clicking to the left of the P, and I'm deleting the space and the two characters in the word of. I'm going back to my Move tool. Remember, you can use the shortcuts for the tools also, T for type, V for move, and I'm moving Island Paradise back underneath Hawaii. Remember the arrow keys on the keyboard that you can use those to nudge into position. I nudged just a little bit to the left. So that's how you make changes to type. You don't have to select it to make those changes. Now that we have that changed, we might want to do a Control or Command S to save again. We're almost finished with this image. We'd like to add a border around the outside edge. Remember, we're filtering to see just type layers. Click upon the T, and now we see all of our layers again. Select the postage stamp layer. And once we've selected the postage stamp layer, we would like to enhance it a bit. We're going to drag it with the Move tool. Make certain that you have the Move tool selected. We're going to drag it to the middle of the screen. Here it is at the top. Kind of to the center right, maybe right about here. And that repositions it. Its blending mode is multiply, so we can see it just a little bit better than we could before. We're going to select our entire image. Two ways to do that. You could say select all, or you could press Control or Command A. You'll notice that there is the dash border around the entire outside edge of the image. Then we're going to select Modify Border. Now, if I added a border at this point, you can see I'm getting a little in a hurry as I get toward the end. I would be adding it to the postage stamp layer, and that isn't a good move, so I'm going to cancel. And before I add that border, I'm going to create a new layer by clicking the new layer icon better at the at the bottom of the layers panel, which creates a new layer at the top of the layers panel named Layer 1, double clicking upon the text and typing border, pressing enter. I still have that area selected around the outside of the image. I have the whole image selected, and I'm going back to Select, Modify, Border. Now I'm going to tell it how big of a selection to make based upon the whole image being selected. I want my border selection to be 10 pixels, so I'm typing 10 in the box and saying OK. And I have a selection of 10 pixels here on the outside edge. I'm going to select white for my foreground color. The easiest way to do that might be to press X or click the switch icon. Make certain white is your foreground. I'm going to the Edit menu, and I'm choosing Fill. From the dialog box, I am going to choose the foreground color, leave all the other settings at their default, and click OK. Now I have a white border around the outside edge of my image, and I need to deselect with a Control D. Now that the image is deselected, I'm to the point that I'm ready to save it one last time as it is with all of its layers intact. I'm going to look at my layers panel and collapse all of my layer styles, make certain that all of my layers have relevant names, and I'm ready to save it. So I'm going to press Control or Command S. That saves our O4 working file. Now this is a fairly large file. The way you can tell that is to click the arrow here at the bottom on the status bar and ask to see the document size. The document size tells you that my file is currently 27.5 megabytes. But if I were to flatten the image, it would only be 2.29 megabytes. Well, that sounds like a great idea, but flattening this image that we have just created would cause us to lose our layer structure. And you want to always have a copy of the file that retains the layer structure should you need to make changes in the future. The best thing for us to do would be to create a duplicate copy of this image and flatten it so that we have the smaller sized image that we might choose to share by email or some other method for sharing with another person. In creating a duplicate, I'm going to go to the image menu at the top and I'm going to say duplicate. That is going to create a duplicate copy of the current image. Of course, it will have the same size and the same layer structure at the moment. So I'm calling this O4 working copy. I could change that name. I guess the book wants me to call it 04 flat.psd. I will click OK. And now I have two documents open. Here is the original file. Here is the flattened version. You'll notice the flattened version has the same file sizes visible at the bottom. I am going to say the 2 megabyte versus the 27 megabyte, and it also has all of the layers intact. On the duplicate version that we're going to flatten, we do so by going to Layer, Flatten Image. That takes all of the layers that were present and combines them into one layer. As you can guess, we cannot modify those layers easily because they've been flattened into a single layer. To save this file, press Control or Command S, and once you have saved the file or you're in the process of saving the file, it will ask you what you want to name it and where. Accept the defaults by clicking Save. And you'll notice at the bottom of the flattened version on the status bar that the numbers are the same. So the actual file size of this version called flat is 2.29 megabytes because it has been flattened. But that in no way affected our working file, which is still 27.5 megabytes and has all of the layers intact. So we have two copies of the file, one flattened, one unflattened. Great difference in the file size. That does conclude Lesson 4. You'll notice in the book that there is a good description of layer comps on page 119 that I would like for you to read. There's also a fun extra credit activity on page 120 and 121 that you might enjoy. This probably happens with family photographs quite frequently when you have 10 to 12 people in the photo and everyone looks good but one or two of the people, and then you have another photo where they look great. It shows you how to combine those two and create one image that has everyone looking great in the same photo, so I think that you would enjoy that.